We'll get started in 2 minutes at 2:05, and then we'll get this conversation going. Thank you to all the hairdressers hairstylists that are here with us today. They're all wearing their Braids for AIDS t-shirts, Braidathon t-shirts. And we're here to support this conversation and be educated.
So will you be able to share the video with the network afterwards, Monique?
The video that was sent in the group recently of the
recording of the conversation.
Oh yes, I definitely be able to.
This conversation, this recording.
Yes, I would be able to send that. Sorry, that is not a problem. Okay, let me send one more message and then we will get started. And I'll put my phone on silent. Okay. Okay. Again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to Braids for AIDS annual Braidathon. This conversation is a little bit different than usually for us because usually we are in a salon, a big vicinity where we're having a salon going on, where we'll have 10 different hairdressers doing their thing and vendors around us and just different conversations and community initiatives that are happening. And this year it's a little different. And the biggest difference is we're virtual, and secondly, we have COVID and the vaccines to talk about this year, where previous years our conversation was around HIV and getting tested, which we did do a little bit earlier. We did have a conversation with 2 people who were living with HIV. One was a comedian who came in and made us laugh for a little bit, and another one was with someone living with HIV in the city of Toronto and just her experience around that. So we are pivoting in another direction. Again, as I said, we're talking about COVID and the vaccine, but I probably didn't even introduce myself. So I am Monique. I am the executive coordinator for Braids for AIDS, and I've been doing this for the last 2 years. It's been a great organization to work with because I get to educate African Caribbean women with HIV and STI information while doing hair. So as exactly what we're doing right now. The ladies are doing hair and we're having this conversation. So with that being said, I want to thank you all for attending. At this point, we'll hand over this next part of the conversation to our doctors from the Black Science Task Force. And we'll start with Dr. Katai. Did I say your name right? Kente? Can you hear me?
Sure, Kwatu Kente.
Kente.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I guess your internet isn't stable because you sometimes fade in and out.
I'm going to work on that while you speak, so go ahead.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Akwatu Kente. I'm the chair of the Black Scientist Task Force on Vaccine Equity. I'm a professor at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health, and I'm also an advisor to the City of Toronto on its COVID Equity Initiative, how the city responds to huge disparities, not just with Black people, but people from the Middle East, Latin Americans, people from South Asia. These are 4 groups, really, that have huge disparities in COVID. So represent about 52% of the population of Toronto, but at 80% of COVID. That's the challenge. It's a huge challenge. And so we are very pleased to be able to talk to you this afternoon. I actually had long wanted to take a tour of barbershops and hair salons during the peak wave 3, virtually or otherwise, because that's where conversations about COVID and about vaccines need to happen in a real way, because that's where a lot of misinformation is circulating. A lot of misinformation about the vaccines and about what the vaccines do to Black people. So we really want to address that from a Black perspective. That's very important. And let me also say, I've lost 2 cousins to HIV on my mother's side and my father's, one on my mother's side, one on my father's side. So like most Black people, HIV is a living reality. A lot of people, it's no longer on their radar. But for people of African descent, it's big on our radar because we are still significantly affected by HIV. So I welcome the opportunity to have an open and frank conversation, because our community has a challenge, a stigma challenge. We're talking about HIV, talking about any infectious disease, but especially HIV, and stigma is a problem for our community. So we hope that we can use COVID to overcome some of the long-standing stigmas that prevent us from maximizing our health, knowing that the society itself reduces the chances of us reaching 100% health, because we have to experience racism every single day. But even given that, we have incredible traditions, because we didn't come from Africa empty-handed when we were brought in those ships. We actually came with knowledge of infectious diseases that would influence the course of vaccinology. So whenever you hear people talking about vaccines, don't think that that's something that has nothing to do with people of African descent. You ought to know that the person who introduced the very concept of inoculation to North America was an African from Ghana, probably. They said he probably was an Akan speaking man who in Boston told the guy who owned him, I could put quotation marks around owning, that in his village, whenever they were facing smallpox, they had traditions they would turn to. And one of the traditions is for someone to go around the village using the pustule from someone who was infected by the smallpox, sticking healthy people. That's the foundation of vaccination. Coming from an African who would not be rewarded financially, didn't get freedom for having introduced this incredible idea, but laid the foundation for vaccine development across 200 years or 300 years. And so it's important to know that any conversation about vaccinology, whether it's COVID vaccines or other vaccines, rests on a contribution from Africa, from an enslaved African person named Onesimus. So I start you off with that, and I thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion with you. We have an esteemed group of people who have dedicated themselves to sharing their wealth of expertise and information with Black communities, not just in Toronto. We've supported Black communities across Ontario, in fact, and are open to supporting Black communities. And actually, people were calling into some of our town halls from around the world. We had calls from Jamaica, from Trinidad, from Nigeria. So we're very open because it's a global pandemic. So I'll turn it over to my next colleague to introduce himself. I think that's you, Dr. David Wood.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be with you today. I'm an immunologist. So I've been doing a lot of research over many years in terms of the immune system, and using that information to help to develop vaccines. So I've worked for over 30 years in the vaccine industry. I've been involved in vaccine projects related to SARS, influenza, HIV, and I'm really pleased to be part of this task force, this Black scientist task force on COVID vaccines, because it enables me to transfer some of the inside information that I have in terms of vaccine developments to help with the understanding of the current COVID vaccines. And hopefully I'll be able to, and will be able to as a task force, help you to make informed decisions about vaccination for yourselves and your clients. So it's a pleasure for me to be with you today. And I'm looking forward to a really interesting discussion.
Candice, why don't you introduce yourself, and then Isaac.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Candice Todd, and I am a naturopathic doctor. And I'm also a health educator. So just what that looks like is helping people to be more educated about their health and preventative medicine. So I think that I offer sort of a unique perspective on this panel, which I'm really happy to be a part of, because I think we as Afro-Caribbean people, we want to hear sort of a broad perspective when it comes to protecting our health. So a conversation about vaccination can also include a conversation about protecting your health and supporting your immune system. And we welcome, and I welcome any questions regarding that.
Hello, my name is Isaac Odame. I'm a pediatrician and a hematologist based at the Hospital for Sick Children. And one of my areas of expertise is sickle cell disease. I'm also professor and director of the Division of Hematology at the University of Toronto. As you all know, sickle cell disease is an inherited blood disorder that predominantly affects people of African descent and some of Indian descent. As a result, I have, in my professional career, seen the disparities that occurs with research and advancement of care for people with sickle cell disease, primarily because it affects people, minority populations, and people of African descent. And so the investment for research and advancement has not been what it ought to be. So I understand disparities and how we are fighting every day to bridge that gap. And I have to say we are making tremendous success as a result of coordinated advocacy and bringing together clinicians and scientists worldwide. So I lead a global sickle cell disease network that is working hard to bridge the gap. Coming to COVID, we know that people of African descent and minorities face disparities every day. There's disparities in outcomes of health issues relating to hypertension, diabetes, obesity, HIV, sickle cell disease, and others. And I'm committed to doing this because if we don't do this, those disparities in outcomes in COVID that Dr. Kenti has alluded to will widen. And that will be to the detriment of our society. And so we need to bridge that gap and make sure that the disparities that exist do not cause our communities to suffer more from COVID. So I'm delighted to be part of this conversation, and I hope that we'll have an exciting, interesting conversation in appropriate cultural context that will be meaningful to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, doctors, for all that great introductions and what you all specialize in. I think my internet's still a little unstable, but I might have to move into a different room. But until then, we'll get started with the first question. So the first question I have for you is, in general, how do vaccines work? How do these vaccines provide us with immunity? And I don't even know who to point to first, but
I can start with this question. As I said, I've been studying the immune system for many years, and vaccines actually work only because we have an immune system. The immune system is our natural defense against anything foreign that attacks our bodies, like viruses and bacteria. Now, normally, for instance, when a virus tries to infect us for the first time, the cells of our immune system are activated And this includes cells that produce what I call weapons of self-defense, antibodies, for instance. And for instance, in the case of, let's think of COVID, antibodies would recognize some of the proteins on the surface of the virus, particularly the S protein that the virus needs. It's like the key that enables the virus to get into the cell. So when we're infected initially with a virus, our immune system ramps up, makes antibodies and other factors. And if the virus or the infection can be controlled, what happens is that we have an immune memory. So our immune system has been taught to recognize that particular virus and those proteins. So that when the virus comes along again, our immune system has already got the information in its memory bank about that particular virus and can mount a rapid response. Now, vaccines work in essentially the same way. When we have a vaccine, and in this case, we're talking about a COVID vaccine, our cells actually make the protein, the S protein, that is on the virus. The thing about vaccines are the vaccines, unlike viruses and bacteria, are non-infectious. So what we're doing now is we're teaching our immune system to recognize something that's infectious by giving it something that's not infectious, maybe a part of the virus or bacteria. And in that case, what happens is that even before we have an infection, our immune system is already ready and prepared. So in the case of COVID, if you've been vaccinated, and we'll get into the vaccines in more detail later on, but if you've been vaccinated against COVID, that means you've got a primed immune system with antibodies and T cells and other factors ready and waiting for when the virus tries to infect you. And then we can be protected against infection. So that's how vaccines work. And they only work because we have an immune system. And really, once we've been vaccinated, once we've been injected with the vaccine, the vaccine itself doesn't stay around very long. 99% of the job that's done after that is by our natural immune system.
Okay, that sounds like something I can understand. Sorry about that. I'm just moving locations. Any other doctor has anything else to say on that, or we could just move on to the next question?
Just to say that, think of your immune system as your military cells that are trained to protect you. But they have to know the enemy so that they prepare to fight it.
Okay.
And the vaccine is giving them information about the enemy that they need to fight. That way they train, they build up, they learn about the enemy, how to hit it hard, how to defeat it. So when the enemy actually arrives, which is the infection, these soldiers are already ready to be able to fight it. And that's how we've been able to defeat infections like smallpox, which has been completely eradicated, polio, which is almost eradicated except some few countries, whooping cough, measles. All these infections have been tackled because of vaccines. And as you know, currently, if you have a child who is going to school, there's going to be a letter come from the school saying, show evidence that they've been vaccinated against some common diseases. Otherwise, they will not enter school. And that is because we don't want to expose other children to these infections. So vaccines have been with us. And as Dr. Kenti said, the origins of it has roots in Africa. And that's something we should embrace and understand as one of the major advances in medicine has been the development of vaccines. And many of us take it for granted. But when we were children, we received these vaccines and they have protected us against life-threatening infections.
You make a
Thank you.
very valid point there on that. I mean, it has definitely been around for a while. I remember getting vaccines, maybe not as an infant, but I definitely remember getting vaccines in school, right? So I remember there was a grade 7 one and then there's a grade 10 one. So, and then when HPV came out as well, that vaccine, you know, my doctor suggested that I did take that. Okay. Are we allowed to just take questions wherever? Okay, go ahead. Kanisha, I know you have a question. Are you able to share?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
I was wondering, can or will the vaccine interact with other medications?
You want to take that, Isaac?
Yes, I'll take that. There are certain medications that may suppress your immune system. And if you are on immunosuppressive treatment, then you should talk to your doctor to tell you whether, when you can take it and how it interacts with the drug. But apart from that, there is no real interaction with common medications that we take. If you are in doubt, speak to your doctor just to be sure that the medicines you're taking are not going to in any way suppress your immune system and therefore affect the way you respond to it. But by and large, those are very few exceptions. By and large, most people are able to take their medications for hypertension, for diabetes, for other illnesses, and take the vaccine as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kanisha, go ahead.
And I just have a quick follow-up with that. So you were talking about the vaccine basically putting antibodies in our bodies. So if we should get infected with COVID, it's there to fight the virus. Now, if you have previously got COVID, is it necessary to get the vaccine? Would that previous infection help fight it again or no?
So our immune system works in stages. You may have heard that there is what we call a booster. So when you catch the COVID infection, you do develop antibodies as a result of fighting the natural infection. But then those antibody levels may wane with time. Okay, so they decline with time. And so the necessity of having a booster doses is to ramp up your antibody level and immune system to ensure that they last long and that you are better able to fight the infection. So having a natural infection, yes, makes you produce some antibodies. It gives you some natural resistance, but it doesn't stay forever. And therefore, you need booster doses to ramp it up. The higher your antibody level, the more stimulated your special cells that fight infections are, the better protected you will be. You may have heard that people are saying, will we need a third dose? Will we need a booster? And in fact, if you've taken many vaccines, you take them one, a second one, and then after a number of years, you take another one. And this is all just to ramp up what you already have so that your levels are high enough to more effectively fight the infection if it happens again.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because you'd think, well, why I've had COVID? Why do I need to be vaccinated? And because we're all different, even though you might have COVID and sometimes severe COVID, you might not have a strong antibody response. Someone else might have a very strong antibody response. So that's why the recommendation is that even if you've had COVID, you should get the vaccine, get both of those doses of the vaccine to give you that boost. And there's some interesting work that's been done from studies showing that because you know that a lot of variants are going around at the moment, and the results suggest that if you've been vaccinated, if you've been exposed, if you've had COVID and then been vaccinated with the vaccine, your immune system is more able to fight some of the variant viruses that come along. So that's an advantage, that's an added advantage to take the vaccine, even if you've had COVID. I just confirm and agree with what Isaac said. It's really important to take the vaccine, even if you've had COVID.
So Isaac talked about a booster shot. So if someone had COVID, are they taking the full 2 shots or just a booster shot? Which I'm assuming booster means one.
Yeah, well, in fact, the recommendation is that you should take both of those doses of the vaccine. So you shouldn't assume that your infection has given you enough of a primary or a first vaccination. You should take the first and second dose of the vaccine. Yeah, sometimes when you say boost, people think you just need 1 shot, because in fact, there are some individuals who it's thought may need a 3rd shot. These are individuals who may not have responded very well to the vaccine in the first place because they've been immunosuppressed, and maybe on immunosuppressive drugs. And some of the very rare breakthrough infections where people have actually been vaccinated but end up still getting COVID. Very rare cases, but it's seen in many cases that these individuals have had some sort of immunodeficiency, so they haven't responded well to the first 2 doses. And so there's discussion about those types of individuals getting a third dose. So in addition, if there's a variant that comes along that the current vaccine doesn't protect very strongly against, we may all end up getting a 3rd dose with a new variant, just like with the flu vaccine, where nearly every year the virus changes, so we have to update the vaccine with the new strain.
Okay, so because you said something in regards into some people, how would you know who is who and who is not? Or is it just going to be everybody's going to get a 3rd shot? I think you kind of answered it before, but just want to get clarification.
Yeah, I think it's only a recommendation now. I know the vaccine companies are suggesting that this will be the case, but I think the health authorities and governments are saying if you have to get a 3rd dose at the moment, it's probably only those individuals who have had these breakthrough infections or very elderly, whose immune systems aren't as robust as a younger person.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question. These vaccines were created so quickly. Why should I, well, not I, but yeah, actually no, why should I trust vaccines, and how are these vaccines approved? And the reason I'm asking that specific question is because in Canada, we get a lot of American news and Canadian news, and then we also have different conversations that are happening. So can you give me some more clarification on that?
Okay, I'll get started and David could add in. So prior to COVID, you're right that historically, it takes years to develop vaccines. The one that was developed the fastest before COVID was probably the measles vaccine. So, which took about 4 years to develop. So normally it takes long to develop. And the reason is simply logistical and being financially calculating. So just imagine you're developing a treatment. You are not sure that it will work. So the rules are that you test them in animals first to make sure they're safe, they're not going to kill, They're not going to cause any disasters. If the animal dies, then you know you're not going to be allowed to proceed. Then you go into humans, a first stage where you have small numbers of people and you want to know whether it is safe for humans, and then what dose you need to be given. You get the results goes to the authorities, they look at it and they say, okay, we can give you the green light to go to the next stage. The next stage, you have tens or hundreds of people. You want to know now whether the vaccine works and whether the dose you've chosen is still safe. You show them the data and they say, yes, we think it's pointing to the fact that it's safe and it probably works. Then you have thousands of patients enrolled in a phase 3, where you're looking more at how it works in a larger population of people and whether it continues to show safety. Then the data is submitted to the approving authorities, in our case, Health Canada. They will look at 4 things. Is it safe? Second, does it work? Third, the way it's manufactured, does it contain any chemicals or any proteins that may be harmful to the body? How have you manufactured it? And above all, they have to answer the 4th question. Does the benefits of taking the vaccine outweigh the risks? And all these processes come one after the other. If you think of somebody investing in developing this, if any part of it fails, that's the end. So they don't pump in money unless they have passed that stage. Are you with me so far? So it's a process of step-by-step, slow data collection, approval, more investment, more production. But this time round, we were in a pandemic that was raging, that was killing people. We needed to move quickly. But fortunately, scientists had developed a technology trying to develop vaccines against SARS, which Dr. Bett talked about. You remember SARS was in Toronto? So they were already working on vaccines. And so when COVID struck, what happened this time was that there was an unprecedented partnership between industry, governments, and academic institutions, research institutions, to say, hey, we're going to pump in investment this time. So rather than do these stages one after the other, we'll let them overlap. And the data analysis by the approval authorities will happen concurrently as they are gathering the data. And guess what? We're going to, once you pass phase 2 and it is looking safe and effective, we're going to give you resources to start producing it, even though you don't know that it's going to pan out to be effective. We will cover your losses if it doesn't work. So with all these investments, we were able to proceed with no shortcuts, but with processes that guaranteed that things were happening, overlapping, and not waiting for a long time before the data is analyzed, before you start the next stage, but the data was being analyzed as they were being gathered. So we were able to compress 4 years or 6 years into 10 months or 11 months. So we should be celebrating an unprecedented partnership and collaboration and science, because all the science behind the vaccines had already been discovered before they were utilized. So that's why this has been so fast, because rarely do we have to develop a vaccine while a pandemic is raging.
Okay, that was a great explanation, but in sort of, I heard this is, we tried a thing and it worked. That's kind of what I heard in a way.
could I add a very quick, I see there's a question for Candace. So I just want to add a quick comment to what Dr. Odami said. And is it okay, Monique?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you know what? We say Black Lives Matter, although we know that all lives matter, but Black lives are less valued by our society and don't get treated the same way with the same level of respect by institutions across the society. That's why we have a Black Lives Matter movement. What we don't have is a Wealthy Lives Matter movement. And the reason why you don't have a Wealthy Lives Matter movement is because wealthy people's lives get accorded more respect than poor people's lives. And this vaccine development effort is an illustration of that, because the threat to the wealthiest people in the world, in the high income countries of the world, was so great that no stone was left unturned to create a vaccine as quickly as possible to save as many of their lives as possible. And we say their lives because in the wealthy part of the world, we also have people of color too who are wealthy, who can afford whatever they can afford. Meanwhile, the people who are poor in the low income parts of the world, in Africa, in Latin America, and the Caribbean, don't have no vaccines. And those are people who are our relatives, our loved ones. And so it's very important for us to think about, when we think about vaccines and vaccine equity, don't just think, about white people over here hard and, I just have to worry about the conspiracies. You got to worry about the reality of our people in Africa and our people in the Caribbean and our people in Latin America who don't have vaccines because they're not offered the same level of protection and access as we are, who just happen to be here for whatever reason, various reasons. And that has to be factored into your thinking about the vaccines so that, you fight for yourself, but you also got to fight for people in these under-resourced areas of the world. Remember that, because they're fighting COVID without vaccines. And we're fighting COVID with vaccines and have a lot of these issues around should we or shouldn't we, whereas our own relatives and loved ones do not have the benefit of the vaccines.
This is true. Thank you for that answer as well. So there was a question in here, and I think both of these are going to Candace. How does vaccine impact? No, maybe this is what. How does vaccines impact mothers who are breastfeeding? And is there enough research on the vaccine can affect? Is there enough research on the vaccine if the vaccine can affect a woman from getting pregnant? So I guess that's all about, I think this is for you, Candace.
Okay, so I think Dr. Kente actually answered the question about breastfeeding and vaccines in there. And I think the question for me was about preventative measures, and it sort of leads into the next question that we were going to answer today. Is there anything sort of natural that we can do? I think that's maybe, Kanisha, what you're talking about. Is there anything natural that we can do to prevent us from getting COVID? So the short answer to that is there's nothing natural that will predictably prevent us from getting COVID. So, all of the ginger teas and the orange peel and the sea moss and all of those things are great for supporting your health, but they're not going to stop you from getting COVID. And they're not going to stop you predictably from getting severe disease outcomes when it comes to COVID and from dying from COVID. So I think it is important, though, because what we do see with COVID is that people who suffer with underlying conditions like asthma, like diabetes, like obesity, they are the ones who are being impacted the most in terms of severe disease outcomes and death. And unfortunately, those people are people who suffer with underlying conditions are overrepresented in the Black community. So this speaks to what Dr. Kente was saying and what Dr. Odami was saying in terms of disparities in health. We don't have the same access And it's causing us to have these underlying conditions that are contributing to more severe disease outcomes. So being preventative with your health in general, so supporting things that are going to help you to prevent obesity, to prevent diabetes, to prevent asthma and cardiovascular disease. Those are the important things to do. That would maybe be similar to prevention, the prevention that the vaccine can offer, but not, again, everyone's different, and there isn't enough evidence to say that this will predictably do that. But there are other measures that you can do to support your immune system in general, but again, won't do what the vaccine can do.
Awesome. So there's two, I'll combine two questions. Were Black and other racialized groups a part of the clinical trial? And then can you explain why the vaccine hesitation within the Black community, why there is a vaccine hesitation within the community, and why Black people are less willing to get the COVID-19 vaccines than other races?
I can start with the first part of the question. And the answer is yes. Black people and other racialized individuals were part of the clinical studies. The percentage was about 10% of the population involved in the clinical studies were Black, and this is from most of the studies that were done. And this, although 10% may not seem very high, this is a great improvement on the traditional numbers of Blacks that are enrolled in these studies. And I think a lot of effort was made to ensure that that cultural group, that our people, our community were involved in these trials. So most of these trials had about 30,000, 40,000 individuals. So 10% were Black, around 20% were Hispanic or Latino. And of course, the majority, 60%, 70% were white, but we had a good representation in these trials. And it's really important, as we know, it's important for us to be represented, because, we're all different, and we may respond differently to different medications. And that's why there's usually an equivalent amount of men and women in the trials. And with more trials coming forward and more work being done in terms of clinical studies, it's going to be important for us to ensure that we have a good representation in those trials. So about 10% of these subjects were Black.
And I will quickly follow before I turn it over to Isaac to close off. I just want to say that when surveys are done on vaccine hesitancy, which is a term coined by the World Health Organization to characterize the reason why many populations across the world aren't enthusiastic about taking a vaccine, there are two, Black people share two key reasons with non-Blacks, and that is safety of the vaccine and the quickness or the quick way in which the vaccine will produce. Those are reasons that we share with everybody else. But there's one reason that Black people have, but other people don't have: historical mistrust. Black bodies have been at the receiving end of medical exploitation, in multifaceted ways, from cells to being denied medicine in research where they had a disease, syphilis, which is a famous Tuskegee experiment that everybody knows about. But then there's been other situations where research protocol weren't followed, ethics, the full range of ethics weren't followed in Africa by pharmaceutical companies, and even in the States, in the United States, there were situations around a particular talcum powder, which was a genital not detergent, but genital deodorant, and people were suspicious that it was causing cancer for more than a decade, but it was denied until eventually proven to be true. So there's a lot of reasons, and by the way, gynecology wouldn't be a science were it not for some of the experiments done on enslaved African women in the development of this science. And you could say it about gynecology, but you could also say it about other sciences, that when we were in captivity, we were actually treated like animals. And it's hard to really appreciate the extent and scope of it, except to say, and I'll end here, because, and the reason I was speaking a lot, because I think I have to sign off at 3. We didn't live in dorms during slavery. Like our animals, people who have animals, they got dogs, we slept on the floor. And one of the things that doesn't come true when people, you see some of these movies, it's a kind of dorm impression, but we were actually treated like animals. And because of that, the exploitation was incredible, extensive, and I think it's actually in our DNA now to doubt what people tell us when they act. When they're telling us they're acting in our best interest, we really have to say, really? Really? Prove it. And you have good reasons to be like that. It's just that we don't have time for a long discussion and a long pathway for the people who made this vaccine to prove to us that the vaccine is safe. So we have to actually come and intervene and determine and share with you that the vaccine is safe. And indeed, we're more at risk than other people. So we actually have to act with more urgency than other people.
And just to add to what Dr. Kenti has very eloquently expressed, in addition to historical factors that are well documented, we showed how Black people have been maltreated, treated with disrespect, and exploited. We also experience it on a daily level, contemporary. You may not be old enough to have lived at the time the Tuskegee experiment happened or all these atrocities happened, but today you experience and live it, where we know that there are inequities in opportunities for jobs, opportunities for housing, food insecurity, access to medical care, that people are treated differentially based on their race and ethnicity. At work, you are passed over for a promotion because of the way you look. So our contemporary experiences reinforce the historical factors. And I think this is why Black people are saying, normally we'll be the last in the line. But now they say we should be the first. What do they have? Is there some hidden agenda? Why are they promoting us when normally we are not promoted at all? So this is creating a lot of questions in people's minds. Is there a hidden agenda? But we as Black scientists are here to tell you that although there will be a justification to think that way, in this instance, the reason why Blacks are catching COVID more, are dying more from COVID, is because of social factors. Because we are the front-end workers. We are the ones going into the COVID zones because of the way we work, because of our housing, because of where we live, because of all these factors. Black people are predominantly more affected by COVID. And so if we don't get smart and say, let's rally our people and let's get this vaccine, we're going to continue to see that disparity that does not favor people of African descent, and not only African descent, but people, racial minority groups. So we have both historical and contemporary reasons to have some doubts. But we are here as scientists to help you make that journey and overcome your doubts to take the vaccine.
Thank you again for that. That's a great answer. The question is, does vaccines affect women from getting pregnant?
I can start with that answer. As far as we know, no, vaccines don't interfere with pregnancy. In fact, in the clinical studies that were done, no pregnant women were recruited, and the participants were asked not to get pregnant. But unfortunately or fortunately, many women did get pregnant during the trials. And the good thing was that they found that there was no difference between the women who were pregnant and those who weren't in terms of the safety or the efficacy of the vaccine. So that was really, really positive. And I know fertility is a question that comes up a lot around the vaccine. Is it going to make me infertile? And again, there were some rumors going around a while ago based on some similarities between the structure, the composition of the S protein and a protein in the placenta. But really, that's been debunked, and there's no evidence that there's any impact that the vaccine has on pregnancy. And in fact, it's really important for pregnant women to take the vaccine, because they're actually been found to be more susceptible to severe COVID, 3 times more susceptible to getting severe COVID, and 5 times more susceptible to getting hospitalized. So it's really important for pregnant women to take the vaccine. And on top of that, I think it was in the chat already that studies were done comparing. I think there were 35,000 women in this study, comparing those who got the vaccine with those who didn't. And again, there was no impact on the progression of the pregnancy or the outcome of the pregnancy, comparing the 2 groups. And in the chat, I think Akwatu mentioned that vaccinating a woman who's been vaccinated, a pregnant woman who's been vaccinated and is breastfeeding, has the potential to transfer antibodies against the virus to their baby during the breastfeeding. And this means that, at that vulnerable age where the child's own immune system is just developing, you can protect that child from COVID based on the transfer of antibodies. So all in all, it's important for women who are planning to get pregnant or are pregnant to get the vaccine, because you're more at risk. And there are very strong positives in terms of getting the vaccine. Apart from protecting you, you can also protect your child.
I will reinforce what my colleague David has just said. In fact, in Toronto, in April, in St. Michael's, 20% of those admitted at one time for COVID were pregnant women who were young. So, and there was an alarm. You will recall that because pregnant women were not included in the original trials, there was uncertainty. They said pregnant women probably should wait, talk to their doctor, decide whether or not they're going to take it. But that was all thrown out of the window when we saw the impact COVID could have on pregnant women. Not only can it affect the pregnancy in causing premature birth or stillbirth, there are higher increases in preeclampsia, higher increases in severe forms of COVID. So the World Health Organization came out and said, if you are pregnant, don't say, I'm going to wait until I deliver my baby before I get the COVID vaccine, because you'll be putting yourself at risk. So currently, in most jurisdictions, pregnant women are encouraged to take the vaccine. And even those who plan to be pregnant are told, don't let that affect your decision to take the vaccine. So I want to reemphasize this, that it is very, very important. And for the males out there, the evidence is clear. Sperm counts were taken before a number of men, about 50 men, took the vaccine. And after they had taken the vaccine, for months after the vaccine, their sperm count was not affected at all. So don't believe the conspiracy theories out there that somehow there's a hidden agenda to control world population. Actually, the fact is that in many parts of the world, they need more people, not less. And Canada is one. We need more people. You may have heard that the government is going to increase the numbers of immigrants, because who is going to work to sustain the aging population? We need young, productive people to drive the economy. And so in Italy, the population is falling. They are pleading with them to have more babies. So there's no hidden agenda at all to affect our fertility. I hope that lays this to rest.
Yes, there's another question in the comment. We're at 3 o'clock, so I kind of want to get through some of the questions a little faster. So the question in the chat is, what are some of the long effects from getting COVID?
You mean effects of COVID infection?
Yes, I believe. What are some of the long-term effects from getting COVID? Yes, COVID infection, yes.
Oh, I'll begin. You've had something called a long haul syndrome. That is, people get COVID, they seem to have recovered from the acute symptoms of fever, headaches, or if they've been in hospital, they've been discharged, or ICU, they've been discharged, and you will expect that they will recover completely. But it doesn't appear to be so. Fatigue, muscle aches, headaches, anxieties, depression, symptoms suggesting post-traumatic syndrome continue after that. And that is why for young people who are saying, oh, young people get COVID and they don't die, so I will just brave it and get the infection. What you're doing is that you are exposing yourself to possibly having long haul syndrome, where you feel all these symptoms even after you've gotten rid of the virus. In fact, in children, there is and teenagers, there's an illness that occurs after they've had COVID. So they've had COVID, they've gotten rid of the COVID virus. If you test them, they'll be negative, or they'll be positive, but very low virus circulating. But they get sick because of the reaction to the virus. So the natural infection should be prevented if possible. For those of you who have had it already, you talk to people who have had it already. A lot of them will say, I am not 100% recovered. I'm still having symptoms. So this is something that is generating a lot of research, and a lot of countries are pumping research. In fact, the European Union is pumping a lot of research to study this, because we believe that COVID will have a long-term impact on healthcare delivery because of these chronic symptoms that are going to be seen. So if you don't have it yet, don't say, I'm going to have it, I'm young and I'll recover. It's a bad decision, because you don't know how it's going to impact you in the long term. So that's a very good question.
Okay, so can we get this question in the quick form? How long after getting COVID should a person get the vaccine? Yeah, that makes sense. How long after?
How long after? It's recommended that if you've had COVID and you haven't been hospitalized, you haven't had any other types of treatment, when the symptoms subside, then you should take the vaccine. If you've been hospitalized and you've had what is called the monoclonal antibody treatment, because some individuals who have been really severely ill and often on ventilators, they've been given these monoclonal antibodies. These are the antibodies that Donald Trump was able to get before anybody else. But because you've got antibodies against the protein in your body, it's said you have to wait for 90 days before you get the vaccine, because the antibodies in your bloodstream could actually just neutralize the vaccine, the effects of the vaccine. But for most individuals, once the symptoms, 14 days after you've had the vaccine, you've been tested positive, after 14 days, you should be safe to have the vaccine.
Okay, Cassandra, you have a question?
Yes, thank you everybody for this conversation has been really educational for me. I'm also with Braids for AIDS. I'm the peer recruiter. I had a question just in terms of herd immunity, because right now, at least in Ontario, the cases are going down. And, you know, for the most part, most people have their first dose. So why would it be like so important for the rest of the individuals who haven't received their first dose? Why would it be important for them to get it? Because they might just say, well, you know, since most people have it, I don't really need to get it now, because most people have the vaccine. So why would you encourage people still right now, even though our rates are really high, why would they still need to get it if they're reluctant to do so?
Great question.
That's a great question. And I think you may have heard people saying herd immunity, maybe 70% of us, 80%, 90%, 95%. The truth is that we don't know, okay? So the reason why we need to push and push is the variants. The variants have changed the whole calculation, because the reason why variants occur is that too many people are unprotected and the virus has an opportunity to continue multiplying. You can think of the mutations or the variants. If you have a process that is being repeated 1 million times, there's a high likelihood that one of the steps will be wrong and something else will result. So the number one way to prevent the variants occurring is if we give the virus no chance to multiply. This virus is smart, but its weakness is that it needs people. It needs people to multiply. And as long as people are unprotected and are allowing the virus to enter and multiply, then it has a higher chance to mutate and develop variants that are even more deadly. And so, yes, we should not be satisfied. We should keep pushing because the variants are emerging, and the more we can get, the better. That's why I think we should do it. But for the Black population, I think the data shows that the percentage of the Black community that are immunized is far lower than the 80%. It's very low. And so for our Black communities, we think we need to make an extra effort to promote the vaccine.
Let me just add quickly to Isaac's great response to this really good question. I think the question was asking, well, I've had one dose, you know, shouldn't that be enough? Why should I worry about a second dose? You know, so many people have been vaccinated now. But it's been shown that one dose, for instance, of the Pfizer vaccine doesn't protect you very well against the Delta virus, the Delta variant, but 2 doses will protect you from severe illness and hospitalization. So Isaac's totally right. The issue is the variants, and who's to know what's going to happen down a few months' time? There could be an even more dangerous variant. I mean, this variant is dangerous because you have sort of 1,000 more copies than the original virus in your lungs if you're infected, and it's transmitted much more easily. But the vaccines will protect you if you have the 2 doses, and so it's not a time to gamble and say, you know, I mean, have the 1 dose, and most people have been vaccinated now. We're not in that time where we can actually say that. You need to get your 2 doses to protect you against the variants, which Delta is becoming the main variant now. So it's really important to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another question is, we heard by the recent news of mixing vaccines. So we've heard that it's not a good idea, and then Canada's like, no, we could do it. And then the other part to add on to that part is when the vaccines were expiring, we're like, hey, yeah, we're going to extend it for another 30 days. That conversation as well. And this is a Monique's question, not from the list, but how can we answer that or get clarification on that?
So I think David can also jump in. So the mixing thing needs to be clarified. In fact, the WHO has walked back on some of its earlier comments. So the primary reason the mixing studies were done was that countries weren't getting supplies in a predictable way. So at one time, you've got a lot of AstraZeneca, people got their doses, they're waiting for a second dose, and the AstraZeneca doses are not coming. But what you have instead is you have more and more Pfizer or Moderna. So people thought, look, for logistic and pragmatic reasons, let's study whether it is possible to mix, because we have to give the vaccines as they become available. And let's remember, we've been very fortunate in Canada, but worldwide, the access to the vaccine is very poor. So many countries are all seeking the same sources of vaccines. So the trial was done where people had gotten AstraZeneca as a first dose and were being given the messenger RNA vaccine as a second dose. It turns out, and I'll come back to the WHO statement, it turns out that actually they get even better response in antibody production than those who got 2 doses of AstraZeneca. And so really that's what gave the public health authorities in Canada the confidence. And remember, there have been reports about blood clots to the AstraZeneca and concern that younger people who have a less risk of dying if exposed to AstraZeneca may have an increased risk of forming blood clots. So that energized the Canadian Public Health Vaccine Committee to say, oh, based on this data, we think it is okay to give a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine as a second dose after receiving AstraZeneca. Now, what the WHO statement meant to say was that don't choose it by yourself, almost like going to a restaurant and saying, this is what I want, this is what I want, I'll take this as first dose, I'll take this as second dose. Don't do it yourself. You have to follow the guidelines of the experts in your country, because they will have studied the data and shown that it is safe. So there's no reason, and David will add more, scientifically, there's no reason to expect that there will be untoward effects if you were exposed to one vaccine first and the other. And secondly, this is something that is done, it's been done with vaccine administration, and we do it all the time, that you are mixing different sources of vaccines after you receive a previous dose of one or the other. So it is safe, it is effective, you shouldn't worry if you've received it. We were part of a webinar in which somebody was regretting that they mixed. If you've mixed, don't regret at all. In fact, it is looking like it is even a better way to do it. David. take it over.
No, I think you've covered most of it. I mean, you've covered the AstraZeneca first dose, then one of the mRNA vaccines at the second dose. And the study is now being done to look at Moderna mRNA and Pfizer mRNA. Can you mix? And, you know, scientifically, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to take one or the other, first or second, because they're both mRNA vaccines. They're both basically exactly the same types of vaccine, and have the same material in the vaccine. And that's more compatible. Those are more compatible than AstraZeneca DNA vaccine followed by an mRNA vaccine. So that's why Canada is allowing that, that Moderna Pfizer mix and match. And, you know, both of my daughters had Pfizer to begin with, and they had a second dose of Moderna, and, you know, they've been fine. So I think it's an important, it gives an important flexibility in terms of being able to manage when doses are going to be available or not.
Okay, we got 15 minutes left, so I just want to get a couple more questions out quickly. Is the vaccine safe for children and children under 12? What do we suggest? Like, what is the safety like for them going back to school in September? And I mean, they're coming back home to people, so like, what would you guys suggest, or what's your opinion?
So adolescents 12 to 17 has been proven, it's been approved by Health Canada. The data on the under 11 and under is being generated, is happening. I gather that the data is almost close to being presented to the approval authorities. So as you can see, the study was done initially in adults, and then they moved to adolescents, and now they're moving to children. So it's a stage-by-stage sort of approach to make sure it's proving to be safe and the dosing and everything is appropriate for age. So we are waiting results of the 12 and under 12, sorry. And once that data is presented to Health Canada, we're going to hear news whether it's been approved or not.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add, I think it's thankfully, and it's, you know, younger children aren't impacted as much by COVID in terms of themselves being ill as older, and so the pathway to approving these vaccines based on age has been an appropriate one, but now the question is, you know, our children are going back to school in September. If they're under 12 and haven't been vaccinated, what's the impact? And it's an important question. I think probably by fall, there'll be vaccines available for children. But until then, if the children are going to school, the issue is, you know, the possibility of transmitting the disease to unvaccinated. So it's important for us, older ones, to be vaccinated to protect ourselves, and also to maintain the measures like wearing masks, really until the majority of the population is vaccinated. Again, if we don't take all the precautions, it's possible that we could be impacted by variants, and the variants could be actually transmitted by younger children who aren't vaccinated yet, even though they themselves might not get a severe disease.
Okay.
And quickly, based on the weather, these respiratory viruses become more easily transmitted during the fall and the winter. So, and that's why we ought to take it seriously. The summer was supposed to be the best time, but we've seen these variants circulating, and there's a high likelihood that they will circulate more in the fall if we don't take the measures that David has just spoken about.
Okay. So we've talked about Moderna, all of that other ones, but this girl here took Johnson & Johnson. Haven't heard much about it. So could you let me know thoughts very quickly, as well as the day that I did take Johnson & Johnson vaccine was the day that I also got a positive COVID test. So I'm a little skeptical of it there, but can you guys just give me a little bit of anybody?
Well, Johnson & Johnson is the one-dose vaccine, right? So you don't have to go back for a second dose. And you wouldn't have got positive COVID from the vaccine because there's no virus in the vaccine. And I'm assuming you had the swab, how were you tested? Yes, the nasal swab. Okay, this is for the PCR test. It's looking for evidence of virus. You've been infected, exposed to the virus. So that wouldn't have been from the vaccine because the vaccine doesn't have the virus. And a lot of people are asking that question, is there a live virus in the vaccine? There's no live COVID virus in the vaccine. There's no live virus at all in any of the vaccines that are registered for use at the moment. So you shouldn't worry because all of the vaccines, even though Johnson & Johnson is a one-dose vaccine and the reported efficacy might not be 95%, it might be 70%. All of the vaccines will protect you against severe COVID, against hospitalization and death, even against the variants. So we shouldn't be too concerned about this percent efficacy. The vaccines were tested at different times in the clinical studies where there were different levels of circulating virus and with different levels of or different types of mutation variants around. So these numbers, you can't, it's like comparing apples and oranges. You really can't compare them. You just have to recognize that the data tells us that all of these vaccines will protect against severe COVID, hospitalization, and death.
Okay, great. I guess with the last little bit of time left, I don't think this was on the list, but we've talked about vaccines for the last hour and pretty much. COVID itself, did it really come from a bat? Did it can we get, I guess, some understanding about that? Because at this point, we don't really hear about where it came from. It just get the vaccine, right? So did it come from a bat?
You want to take that, Isaac?
Yes, I'll take that. So as you know, there's a lot of controversy. There are two possibilities. One, that it came from another animal and jumped into humans. And the possibilities are, is it a bat? Is it a ferret? Is it an intermediate live animal that jumped into humans? The other theory, which is also controversial, is was it an accidental leak from scientific experimentation on some of these coronaviruses? And as you know, China was the origin of it. And this is creating a lot of conflict between China and the rest of the world. The WHO is leaning on China to allow experts to come in and to examine the Wuhan lab to see whether an accidental sort of leak occurred. It has occurred before. It's something that happens because you are experimenting on these viruses that have been changed and somebody gets infected. But that is something that is being looked into at the moment. And I think we ought to wait for that to play out. The notion that this was intentionally created has been thrown out of the window. I think there's a lot of conspiracy out there that this is not a pandemic, but rather a plandemic. You may see that on the internet, that somebody planned it, it was engineered, there's an agenda going on, they're making billions out of these vaccines. That is not true. But let me say overall, your house is burning, okay? The first thing you do is you've got to stop the fire. And then you can then look into what caused it. What you don't do is to try to go into your burning house, trying to find the cause of it. So all I'm saying is that Yes, that's an issue to be answered, but let's be patient to get to the truth. Currently, we have to stop the fire. The fire is burning, it's raging, it's killing us, and we've got to put the fire off, put the fire off.
Awesome. I like that parable. That was a very good one. And I guess this is something that I've noticed, and I'm sure other people may have noticed. I feel like in Canada, there's been a way that we've put so much emphasis on vaccine and borders and all of this stuff that we're creating isolations amongst ourselves. As doctors who are in these seats and who are speaking to higher people, how can we not do that? Like now it's vaccinations at this table, non-vaccinated at this table. Like, I don't really like the feel of what it's becoming, because I never grew up in slavery, but we dealt with segregation already. Like, are we going back to that time of vaccinated, unvaccinated, that theory? And I don't know how you guys can answer this question, but I'm hoping that there's something can come from that.
Candice, you want to take it?
Yes.
So I agree with you in terms of, there's a lot of controversy and it's a lot of like us and them right now. And definitely this has been a contentious topic that has been divisive for a lot of people. I don't think it was sort of intentionally, that was an intentional thing. It's just something that, because we have so much access to information, whether it is, evidence-based or not, it's creating these divisions. So what I tell my patients and what I tell people and what I'm so thankful for today in terms of everyone coming out to just listen to the conversation, to contribute to the conversation, is that really what we're here to do is support informed decision making for your own health. So, hopefully that doesn't create division, but we are thankful that you are here to hear us out today, and add information to your own personal arsenal to make, again, informed decisions for your health. So I don't think that answered your question too well, but
Not really, but it's just scary to see where this.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. There's just so much misinformation out there, and it's hopefully town halls like these are adding more evidence-based information for people to make decisions based off of.
Yeah, I think we have to try and maintain this respect for one another, even if we disagree. And I don't think most of the people who are vaccine hesitant are anti-vaxxers. I mean, anti-vaxxers, it's hard to discuss anything with these people. I mean, I've had to tell some of my friends that, look, we have to stop communicating like this. You know where I stand, I know where you stand. If we're going to maintain a relationship, let's leave that aside. It's been politicized too much. Let's try and maintain our relationship, but we have to talk about other things. When it comes to people who are, I'd say, really hesitant because of they need information, I think we can engage with these individuals in a respectful way, not saying that we have all the answers or that you're wrong, but try and, as Candice said, give the information, the correct information, the scientific information, and lead them to sites on the internet where they're actually debunking some of the misinformation, because there are a lot of these sites. Unfortunately, a lot of us don't get these sent to our WhatsApp because it's not sending the message that some people want to send. But I think if we can respect one another and try and find out why someone has this opinion, and I think that's going to be the only solution, because even governments are politicizing this issue, and I don't think
our borders are an example, right? 3 days
Yeah.
and you're not vaccinated in a hotel for 3 days. Like, I feel like that is part of the scare tactic, and that's another reason where people are like, to be honest, I only took the vaccine because I wanted to travel. That's it. And yeah, that was
I
it.
say whatever it takes.
I've heard that before too. Whatever it takes to get you vaccinated, that works.
And Monique, that's a good enough reason.
I guess. Anybody else have any more questions before we take a wrap?
Yes, I do.
Go
I
ahead.
had COVID March. First of all, I'm Monique's aunt. I had COVID in April. My history is I have blood pressure and asthma. And the COVID really hit me. My entire family had it, but I ended up going to the hospital in ICU. However, my oxygen level was dropped at 88, didn't go any lower, so I didn't have to be incubated, thank God. It was a very, very, very scary experience. I was in that room for 7 days by myself for the whole 10 days. They gave me so much antibiotics. They gave me, I don't know what they gave me, steroids, everything. And right now I'm losing my hair. I comb my hair is falling out. I'm having lots of pain. Some mornings I can't even get out of bed. I'm having excruciating pain. I have headaches sometimes, but I'm thankful to be alive. I'm thankful to be alive, but I'm somewhat nervous about taking the vaccine because of all the different things I hear about the vaccine. I'm really nervous about taking the vaccine. My doctors keep saying, you gotta take it, Brenda. Just in case you get the variant, you won't have to go to the hospital or be incubated, but I'm really nervous about taking it. I don't know what to do. Right now I'm praying about it. I don't know if you can help me clarify or ease my anxiety about it. I'm just really nervous. I don't go anywhere. If I do go out, I wear a mask, and I don't know. It was just a scary experience for me in that hospital. Very scary.
Thank you for sharing that, Auntie.
Mm-hmm.
And I empathize with you. And the only thing I want to say to assure you is that the whole principle of vaccine is that we think the side effects that you get from being exposed to the vaccine are way, 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 way less than if you get a natural infection.
Okay.
That's the whole principle of vaccine.
Mhm.
It doesn't say the vaccine is 100% safe. Nothing is. You get some reaction, you get some pain at the side, some fever, a little headaches and all that. But we think that that's a price worth paying to have another experience of what you went through.
Mm-hmm.
So Brenda, I will ask you to focus on the challenges you went through, and you are not completely through yet. You say you still have some symptoms and signs from your infection. Can you contemplate another infection from a variant again?
No.
No, it should be an absolute no. And so taking the vaccine helps you to be more certain that you can prevent a second COVID infection with a variant that will be more sort of more virulent and more deadly. So I understand your fears, but I encourage you be bold and take the necessary step to ensure that you don't get a recurrence of this experience.
Okay.
Let me just add, Brenda, that at the moment now in Canada and in the US, the people who are in hospital because of COVID are 99% of them, and this is nearly everyone, 99% of the people who are in hospital because of COVID haven't taken the vaccine. And it shows you how protective the vaccine is. because people who have had the vaccine aren't going into hospital now. It's the people who haven't had the vaccine. And as Isaac said, you know, the severe side effects from a vaccine are so rare. And it's really interesting because this goes for all the vaccines that we've had, because the vaccines have been so powerful. I mean, you don't see people walking on crutches because they've got polio. You don't see people with pits in their face because of smallpox. And I think because we don't see those things, we say, well, do we really need vaccines?
Mhm.
And you know what happens as soon as communities stop taking vaccines? We saw it with measles. Measles is on the rise. Vaccines are protecting us, and Brenda, we don't want to see you back in hospital again.
Right.
We don't
wanna
want to
go
see you back in hospital again.
It's horrible.
Brenda, I will give you a call. I'll give you a call on Monday, and then we'll try to get you booked at Taibu for a shot.
Is it
Or I'll even,
Pfizer?
I believe it is Pfizer at Taibu, and I'll even come with you if you need that.
I'll talk to you on Monday.
All right, sounds good, Auntie.
Thanks.
And I think that is, anybody else may have a question, and if not, we'll wrap it up. We've all had a long day. Nothing. Okay, great. You guys answered a lot of questions for me, definitely. So I really appreciate you giving us your afternoon today. And it was even great to be able to change the conversation. Like I said earlier, we were having the HIV conversation and coming now into the vaccine and the hesitation. Hopefully, I mean, I don't know if we all left with enough to be like, to go tell friends and family that would be like, this is what I heard, and, you know, get it regurgitated right back out. But at least for ourselves, for those who may have not taken it here, hopefully there's something that they feel at peace with and they can make themselves an appointment and get themselves vaccinated. With that being said, again, we want to thank you, Dr. Todd, Dr. Burt, and Dr. Ovid for coming today, and the rest of the team from the Black Scientist Task Force. I really do appreciate you guys giving us your time today. Again, we were talking about it with the HIV. Without education, you know, there's going to always be stigma. And we even said in our conversation today that the similarities of like HIV and COVID, right? With somebody with HIV, you can't see it. It's not written on their forehead, but they have it. The same way with COVID, you know, it's not written on them, but you know, by one act, it's pretty much transmitted and it can change your life completely. So again, and I've said this before, but thank you again for giving your time. And to all the hairdressers or hairstylists that are on right now, we appreciate you listening and tuning in, because we know as Braids for AIDS and a part of our task in the vaccine engagement team is to get into the hair salons and the barbershops, because we know, as we said earlier, that's where the conversations happen. That's where the sussa and the stuff that are truth or the stuff that are not true happens, right? So our task as Braids for AIDS is to get into those locations and to educate, and hopefully, you know, with information like this, we can be able to help get our community vaccinated. Again, the one and only time we're at the front of the line, but we can go ahead and get that. So again, thank you all for joining. It is a little bit past 3:30, but I want you to be able to enjoy the afternoon or whatever it is before the rain falls. So thank you all again and have yourself a great evening.
Thank you, Monique. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.